The warm, amber glow of sunset cast long shadows over Willow Creek as Rosalind Dawson stood frozen on the rickety porch, blood staining her trembling hands and panic rising in her chest. For the third time in her 23 years, she found herself accused of something she didn't do, but this time. A man lay dead, Wyoming territory, 1876. Rosalind had come west with dreams bigger than the endless sky. After losing her parents to influenza in Boston, she had packed her meager belongings and answered an advertisement to teach at the newly established school in Willow Creek. The promise of independence and purpose had called to her like a siren song. 6 months into her new life, that dream was crumbling around her. "Miss Dawson," Sheriff Mills' voice boomed across the schoolyard as Rosalind frantically tried to wash the blood from her hands at the pump. "Don't you move a muscle." The sheriff approached with his deputy flanking him, both men's expressions grim. Behind them, a small crowd of townspeople had gathered, their whispers carrying on the evening breeze. "Sheriff Mills, please," Rosalind said, her voice cracking. "I found him like that. I was walking home and heard a groan from behind the mercantile. When I went to look, save it for the judge, Miss Dawson," Sheriff Mills cut her off, grabbing her arm. "We've got a witness saw you arguing with Mr. Patterson earlier today." That was about the school supplies he was overcharging the children for, and now he's lying dead with a knife in his chest, and you're covered in his blood. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Mighty convenient you found him, wouldn't you say?" The deputy produced a pair of iron handcuffs. "Miss Rosalind Dawson, you're under arrest for the murder of Thomas Patterson." The words struck like physical blows. As the cold metal closed around her wrists, Rosalind saw her life in Willow Creek ending before it had truly begun. "No one will believe this," she whispered, more to herself than to the men flanking her. "You're right about that," the sheriff replied, misunderstanding her meaning. "No one's going to believe any story you cook up." As they marched her toward the jailhouse, the crowd parted. Some faces showed shock, others a smug satisfaction that confirmed Rosalind's worst fears as a newcomer and outsider. She had never truly been accepted. "I didn't kill him," she said, louder now as desperation took hold. "Please, someone has to believe me." The townsfolk averted their eyes, some mothers pulling their children closer as if Rosalind might somehow taint them. 6 months of teaching their children, attending church alongside them, and contributing to their community meant nothing in the face of suspicion. Then, from the shadows near the livery stable, a tall figure stepped forward. The fading light caught the silver star on his dusty black vest, not the local tin star of Sheriff Mills, but the silver badge of a U.S. Marshal. "What's the charge here, Sheriff?" His voice was deep and steady, carrying the natural authority of a man accustomed to being listened to. Sheriff Mills straightened, clearly annoyed at the interruption. "Marshal Irwin, this doesn't concern federal matters." The marshal stepped closer, and Rosalind could see him clearly now, tall and broad-shouldered with a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, a startling shade of ice blue, assessed the situation with calm precision. "Xavier Irwin," he introduced himself with a slight nod to Rosalind before turning back to the sheriff. "Murder in a territorial town concerns me plenty. What evidence do you have beyond circumstantial?" "Found her with the body, hands covered in blood," the sheriff replied defensively. "And she had a public disagreement with Patterson earlier today. Town's got a right to swift justice." Marshal Irwin's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. "Town's got a right to proper justice, Sheriff. I'll be staying in Willow Creek for the time being. I expect the prisoner to be treated according to the law." The sheriff's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. As they continued toward the jailhouse, Rosalind found herself walking closer to the marshal. When they reached the small building that served as the town's jail, he held the door open and Rosalind paused. "No one believes me," she said, her voice barely audible, eyes pleading with this stranger for understanding. The marshal held her gaze for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then the corner of his mouth turned up slightly. "Then I'll be the first one who does," he replied quietly, so only she could hear. It wasn't much, just 6 simple words, but as Rosalind was led to the single cell in the back of the jailhouse, those words wrapped around her heart like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. The cell door clanged shut behind her with a terrible finality. Sheriff Mills hung the key on a hook by his desk, clearly visible to remind her of her captivity. "Trial will be when Judge Harrison comes through next week," he announced. "Until then, you'll stay put." As he and his deputy exited to disperse the growing crowd outside, Marshal Irwin lingered. "Mind if I ask the prisoner some questions, Sheriff?" Sheriff Mills frowned but shrugged. "Suit yourself, Marshal. Just lock up when you leave." When the door closed behind the sheriff, Marshal Irwin pulled a wooden chair up to the bars of Rosalind's cell. He sat with the casual ease of a man who'd seen the inside of many jailhouses. "Miss Dawson, I need you to tell me exactly what happened," he said, his voice neither accusatory nor particularly sympathetic, just matter of fact. Rosalind sank onto the thin mattress of the cell's cot. "Why should I?" "You're just like the rest of them. You've already decided I'm guilty." "If I'd decided that, I wouldn't be sitting here," he replied evenly, "and I wouldn't have told you I believe you." She studied him for a moment, trying to discern any trace of deception. Finding none, she took a deep breath. "I was walking home from the school. I stay late on Tuesdays to prepare lessons for the rest of the week." She twisted her hands in her lap. "I heard a sound behind the mercantile, a kind of groan. When I went to look, I found Mr. Patterson bleeding on the ground." "The knife was already in his chest. Did you touch anything?" I tried to help him," she admitted. "I checked for a pulse, tried to stop the bleeding. That's how I got the blood on my hands, but he was already. He died while I was kneeling there." Marshal Irwin nodded slowly. "Did you see anyone else in the area?" "No, but I wasn't looking. I was focused on Mr. Patterson." "And your disagreement with him earlier?" Rosalind's shoulders slumped. "He raised prices on school supplies again. Some of the children can't afford them." "We argued about it in front of the mercantile. It wasn't the first time." "Loud enough for others to hear?" She nodded miserably. "Mrs. Henderson from the millinery shop was there, and Mr. Collins from the bank." The marshal leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "Miss Dawson, I need to know if you have enemies in town." A bitter laugh escaped her. "I'm the outsider, Marshal. The Eastern woman who came to teach their children without understanding their ways. I have plenty of people who don't care for me, but enemies." She shook her head. "Not that I know of. And Patterson, who might have wanted him dead?" Rosalind considered this. "He wasn't well liked. He charged too much extended credit only to those he favored, and—" She hesitated. "And," Marshal Irwin prompted. "There were rumors about him and some of the young women who worked for him. Nothing proven but whispers." The marshal's expression darkened momentarily. "I'll look into it." He stood, returning the chair to its place. "Try to rest, Miss Dawson. This isn't over yet." As he reached the door, Rosalind called after him. "Marshal Irwin, why do you believe me when no one else does?" He turned, his hand on the doorknob. "I've been hunting men and occasionally women across this territory for 15 years. I've learned to spot a killer." His eyes met hers through the bars. "You're no killer, Miss Dawson, and I aim to prove it." After he left, Rosalind sat alone in the dimly lit cell, clinging to the small comfort of his words. Outside, she could hear the murmur of the town continuing its evening routines, indifferent to her plight. Sleep came in fitful bursts that night, interrupted by nightmares of blood and accusations. When dawn finally broke, Rosalind was already awake, sitting on the edge of the cot with her back straight and her resolve hardening. If Marshal Irwin was willing to believe in her innocence, then she would not surrender to despair. Somehow, she would endure this and find a way back to the life she had started to build. The morning brought Deputy Collins with a tray of food, a hard biscuit, some beans, and a cup of weak coffee. "Sheriff says to tell you the marshal's been asking questions around town," he said, sliding the tray through the slot in the bars. "Thank you," Rosalind replied, trying to maintain her dignity despite her rumpled appearance. The deputy lingered, shuffling his feet awkwardly. "Miss Dawson, I just wanted to say. My boy Tommy, he's real upset about you being in here, says you're the best teacher Willow Creek's ever had." Tears pricked at Rosalind's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Please tell Tommy I'm thinking of all my students." The deputy nodded and left. Rosalind picked at the food without appetite, wondering what the marshal might discover and whether it would be enough. By mid-morning, she had visitors Mrs. Harrison and her daughter Emma, both dressed in their Sunday best despite it being Wednesday. "We've brought you some things, Mrs. Harrison said stiffly, handing a small bundle to the deputy to pass through to Rosalind. "A change of clothes, some soap, and a comb." "Thank you," Rosalind said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "That's very kind." Mrs. Harrison's mouth formed a tight line. "I don't know if you did what they say, Miss Dawson, but Emma insisted we come. She says you've been a good teacher to her." Beside her mother, Emma, a bright 12-year-old, nodded eagerly. "I told Mama you couldn't have hurt anyone. You wouldn't even let the boys kill a spider in the classroom last week." Despite everything, Rosalind found herself smiling. "Thank you, Emma." After they left, more visitors came, some out of genuine concern, others merely curious to see the schoolteacher turned murderess. Rosalind endured their scrutiny with as much grace as she could muster, answering questions when asked, accepting the small kindnesses offered, and ignoring the whispers. It was late afternoon when Marshal Irwin returned, his expression grim but determined. "Miss Dawson, I need to ask you about the knife," he said without preamble. "What about it?" "It was a distinctive blade bone handle with a carved eagle. Have you ever seen it before?" Rosalind thought carefully. "I don't believe so. I didn't pay much attention to it when I found Mr. Patterson," the marshal nodded. "I thought as much. It belongs to Jacob Thornton." "The blacksmith?" Rosalind's brow furrowed in confusion. "I hardly know the man." "He claims the knife was stolen from his shop last week. Convenient timing." "Do you think Marshal Irwin held up a hand?" "I'm not jumping to conclusions, but I find it interesting that Thornton owed Patterson a substantial amount of money, a debt that would have been called in at the end of the month." Hope flickered in Rosalind's chest. "Have you told Sheriff Mills?" "I have. He's questioning Thornton now." The marshal's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. "Mills doesn't like me interfering, but he's a lawman at heart. He'll follow the evidence." "Thank you," Rosalind said softly. "Don't thank me yet, Miss Dawson. We're a long way from proving your innocence." Before he could say more, the jailhouse door burst open and Sheriff Mills strode in, his face thunderous. "Thornton's got 3 witnesses placing him at the saloon when Patterson was killed," he announced. "Solid alibi." Marshal Irwin's expression didn't change. "Witnesses can be bought, Sheriff. Maybe in the big cities you ride through, Marshal, but not in my town." Sheriff Mills crossed his arms. "Besides, those witnesses include my brother-in-law and the Reverend." Rosalind's heart sank as quickly as it had risen. Marshal Irwin, however, merely nodded thoughtfully. "Well then, we keep looking. What about the money in Patterson's store? Any signs of robbery?" "Everything accounted for according to his ledger," Mills replied. "This wasn't about money." "It's rarely that simple," Marshal Irwin murmured. As the 2 lawmen continued their discussion, Rosalind noticed something, a flicker of uncertainty in Sheriff Mills' eyes when the marshal mentioned the ledger. It was brief, but unmistakable. When the sheriff left, promising to send the deputy with dinner for the prisoner, Rosalind moved closer to the bars. "Marshal," she said urgently, "I think Sheriff Mills knows something about the ledger. Did you notice how he reacted?" Irwin nodded slightly. "I did." "Patterson's bookkeeping might hold answers. Could you look at it? The ledger might show who else had reason to want him dead." The marshal studied her for a moment. "You've got good instincts, Miss Dawson. I'll see what I can find." True to his word, Marshal Irwin returned after dark, moving with the quiet stealth of a man accustomed to tracking dangerous prey. He unlocked the jailhouse door carefully and slipped inside. "Miss Dawson," he whispered, approaching her cell. "Are you awake?" Rosalind rose from the cot where she'd been pretending to sleep. Yes, did you find something? He nodded, producing a small leather-bound book from inside his vest. Patterson kept 2 ledgers. This one was hidden beneath a floorboard in his office. 2 ledgers. Why would he? One for show, one for truth, the Marshal explained, opening the book. Patterson was blackmailing half the town. Rosalind gasped softly. Blackmailing? But how? Information is powerful currency, Miss Dawson. Patterson gathered secrets the way some men gather gold. He turned the ledger so she could see the neat columns of names and amounts. These aren't just debts for goods. They're payments for silence. Scanning the list, Rosalind recognized many prominent citizens of Willow Creek, including Jacob Thornton and, to her shock, Sheriff Mills himself. The sheriff, too, she whispered. Marshal Irwin nodded grimly. Mills has been skimming from the town's tax collections, Patterson knew. This changes everything, Rosalind said, hope flooding back. With so many people having reason to want Patterson dead, it still doesn't clear you, he interrupted gently. It gives others motive, yes, but you were still found with the body. Her shoulders slumped. Then what do? We find the real killer. He tucked the ledger away. I need to leave town tomorrow to wire the territorial governor. Mills can't be trusted to investigate properly, not when he's implicated. Alarm shot through Rosalind. You're leaving, but what about me? I'll be gone 1 day, 2 at most. His voice softened slightly. I gave you my word, Miss Dawson. I believe you're innocent and I aim to prove it. She wanted to protest further, but the determination in his eyes stopped her. Instead, she asked, what can I do while you're gone? Remember everything you saw that day, even the smallest detail might matter. He hesitated, then added, and stay strong. Willow Creek will be watching to see if you break. With that, he slipped away as quietly as he'd come, leaving Rosalind alone with her thoughts and the dangerous knowledge of Patterson's secret ledger. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Deputy Collins brought her meals and emptied the small chamber pot in her cell, but otherwise, Rosalind was left alone with her anxiety. She could hear the town going about its business outside, occasional voices drifting through the small, barred window high on the jail wall. By afternoon, whispers of the Marshal's departure had reached her. Some visitors made thinly veiled comments suggesting that he'd abandoned her cause, having realized her guilt. Rosalind said nothing, clinging to the faith that Marshal Irwin would return as promised. As dusk fell, Sheriff Mills entered the jailhouse looking smug. Your Marshal friend rode out this morning, he announced, dropping into the chair behind his desk. Seems he's not as convinced of your innocence as you thought. He'll be back, Rosalind replied calmly, though her heart raced. The sheriff laughed without humor. Don't count on it, Miss Dawson. Men like Irwin blow through towns like tumbleweeds, here today, gone tomorrow. Is that what you're hoping for, Sheriff? The words slipped out before she could stop them. Are you afraid of what he might discover if he keeps investigating? Mill's expression darkened. He rose and approached the cell, his hand resting meaningfully on the gun at his hip. Careful, Miss Dawson. Accusations against a law officer are serious business. Rosalind held his gaze, refusing to be intimidated despite her vulnerable position. After a moment, Mills turned away with a dismissive grunt. Judge Harrison will be here day after tomorrow. Best start preparing yourself. After he left, Rosalind sank onto the cot, her brave front crumbling. What if the Marshal didn't return in time? What if Judge Harrison, known for his swift justice, sentenced her before the truth could be uncovered? That night, sleep eluded her entirely. Every creak of the building, every distant sound from the town, had her starting up, hoping it might be Marshal Irwin returning. Dawn broke with no sign of him. Rosalind washed her face with the small basin of water Deputy Collins provided, changed into the fresh clothes Mrs. Harrison had brought and braided her hair neatly. If these were to be her last days as a free woman, she would face them with dignity. Mid-morning brought an unexpected visitor, Emma Harrison, slipping into the jailhouse while the deputy dozed at his desk. Miss Dawson, she whispered, approaching the cell. I brought you something. She pressed a small, folded paper through the bars. "Emma, you shouldn't be here," Rosalind whispered back, though she took the paper gratefully. "I had to come," the girl insisted. "I saw something the day Mr. Patterson died. I was too scared to tell before, but I told Marshal Irwin yesterday before he left." Rosalind's heart leapt. "What did you see, Emma?" "I saw someone go into the alley behind the mercantile right before you found Mr. Patterson." "Someone with a knife." Emma glanced nervously at the still sleeping deputy. "I have to go before Mama notices I'm gone, but Marshal Irwin said he'd be back today. He promised." Before Rosalind could ask more questions, Emma slipped out as quietly as she'd come. With trembling fingers, Rosalind unfolded the paper the girl had given her. It was a page torn from a child's primer with a message scrawled in Marshal Irwin's bold handwriting: "Hold fast. Returning with authority to take over the investigation." Relief washed through her. He hadn't abandoned her after all. The hours ticked by with agonizing slowness. Deputy Collins woke, embarrassed to find he'd dozed off, and busied himself with paperwork. Sheriff Mills came and went, each time eyeing Rosalind with increasing hostility. By late afternoon, the atmosphere in the town had changed. Rosalind could sense it in the heightened voices outside, the quickened footsteps passing the jailhouse. Something was happening. Then came the sound of multiple horses approaching, followed by the jailhouse door swinging open to reveal Marshal Irwin, flanked by two other men wearing similar silver stars. "Sheriff Mills," Marshal Irwin announced formally, "by order of Territorial Governor Hoyt, I'm assuming jurisdiction in the murder investigation of Thomas Patterson." Mills rose from his desk, face flushing with anger. "On what grounds?" "Conflict of interest," Irwin replied, handing over an official-looking document. "Given your financial arrangement with the deceased." The sheriff's hand moved toward his gun, but the presence of 3 federal marshals made him reconsider. "This is my town, Irwin. You can't just ride in and it's done, Mills." Marshal Irwin's voice was implacable. "You can cooperate or you can face obstruction charges, your choice." For a tense moment, Rosalind feared violence would erupt. Then, with a muttered curse, Mills stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Marshal Irwin turned to Rosalind, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Miss Dawson, I trust you're holding up." "Better now," she admitted, relief making her light-headed. "Emma Harrison came to see me. She said she told you something important," he nodded. "Emma saw Jacob Thornton enter the alley behind the mercantile minutes before you discovered Patterson, despite his solid alibi at the saloon." He moved to unlock her cell. "We're not charging you, Miss Dawson, but I can't release you officially yet. For now, you'll be in protective custody." As the cell door swung open, Rosalind nearly collapsed with relief. Marshal Irwin steadied her with a gentle hand on her elbow. "We need to move quickly," he said. "Thornton's missing and Mills has likely warned him. My colleagues are searching the town, but I'm taking you somewhere safe in the meantime." "Where?" Rosalind asked as he guided her toward the back door of the jailhouse. "My camp outside town. Mills won't look for you there." He helped her onto a horse waiting in the alley. "Can you ride?" "Yes, but not well," she admitted. "Just hold on, it's not far." As they rode out of town, keeping to the back roads and shadows, Rosalind felt the weight of the past days lifting slightly. She wasn't free yet, but for the first time since her arrest, true hope blossomed in her chest. Marshal Irwin's camp was a small, neat arrangement near a creek about a mile outside town. A canvas tent, a fire ring, and minimal provisions spoke of a man accustomed to traveling light and moving quickly. "It's not much," he said as he helped her dismount, "but you'll be safe here." "Thank you," Rosalind said, meaning it with every fiber of her being, "for believing me when no one else would." Something in his expression softened. Sometimes a person just needs one person to believe in them. He busied himself building a small fire. "We'll stay here tonight. By morning, we should have Thornton in custody." As darkness fell, they shared a simple meal of beans and jerky. The night air carried a chill, and Marshal Irwin wordlessly offered her his coat, which she accepted gratefully. "May I ask you something, Marshal?" Rosalind ventured after they had eaten, Xavier, he corrected. Out here, there's no need for formality. Xavier then. The name felt strangely intimate on her lips. Why did you really believe me? You didn't know me. He was silent for so long that she thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, 8 years ago I arrested an innocent man. The evidence seemed clear, the witnesses certain, I never questioned it. His eyes reflected the dancing flames. He hung before the truth came out. I'm sorry, Rosalind whispered. After that, I promised myself I'd never take the easy answer again. He looked up, meeting her gaze. When I saw you in that cell, something didn't fit. You had the look of someone wronged, not someone hiding guilt. And now, do you still believe in my innocence? A rare smile transformed his weathered face. More than ever, Miss Dawson, Rosalind, she offered. If I'm to call you Xavier, you should use my given name. Rosalind, he repeated, and something in the way he said it made her heart beat faster. They talked late into the night about her life in Boston before coming west, about his years enforcing the law in the territories. Despite their vastly different experiences, Rosalind found in Xavier a kindred spirit, someone who understood what it meant to stand apart from others, to follow one's own sense of right and wrong regardless of the cost. When exhaustion finally overtook her, he insisted she take the tent while he slept by the fire. Too tired to argue, Rosalind accepted, falling asleep to the comforting knowledge that, for the first time in days, she was truly safe. She woke to the sound of horses approaching. Panic seized her momentarily until she heard Xavier's calm voice greeting his fellow marshals. Emerging from the tent, she found Xavier and Marshal Thompson, one of the men who had accompanied him to the jailhouse the previous day. Miss Dawson, Thompson acknowledged her with a nod. Good news. We've apprehended Thornton trying to board a train in Cheyenne. He's confessed to killing Patterson. Relief flooded through her. He confessed. But why did he kill him? Blackmail, like we suspected, Xavier explained. Patterson had evidence that Thornton had been selling faulty equipment to the mining company's equipment that caused the collapse that killed 3 men last spring. Those poor men, Rosalind breathed, the true scope of the tragedy hitting her. Their families never knew the truth. They will now, Marshal Thompson assured her. Thornton's facing charges for the murders of Patterson and those miners, and Sheriff Mills has been relieved of duty pending an investigation into his financial dealings. What happens now? Rosalind asked. You're free to return to Willow Creek, Xavier told her. Your name's been cleared. The news should have brought nothing but joy, yet Rosalind felt a curious mixture of relief and something like disappointment. Freedom meant Xavier would soon ride away, continuing his duties elsewhere. Thank you both, she said sincerely. I don't know how I can ever repay you. No need, Marshal Thompson said. Just doing our job. He turned to Xavier. I'll head back to town, start the paperwork. Take your time getting Miss Dawson settled back in. After Thompson departed, a strange awkwardness fell between Rosalind and Xavier. The easy conversation of the previous night seemed suddenly difficult to recapture. I should get you back to town, Xavier said finally, beginning to break down his small camp. People will be waiting to apologize to you. Will they? Rosalind asked doubtfully. Or will they just find new reasons to consider me an outsider? He paused in his work. Does it matter? You've proven your strength. You don't need their approval. Perhaps not, but I do need their trust if I'm to continue teaching their children. She sighed, helping him roll up the tent canvas. I came west seeking a place to belong. I'm not sure Willow Creek can be that place anymore. Xavier was quiet for a moment. Where would you go? I don't know, she admitted. Perhaps Denver or further west to California, big cities, he commented. Lot of opportunities for a woman with your education. Yes, I suppose so. She studied his profile as he secured the tent to his pack horse. And you, where does a U.S. Marshal go when his case is solved? A faint smile touched his lips. Wherever the next telegram sends me, that's the nature of the job. It sounds lonely, Rosalind observed quietly, his hands stilled. It can be. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, of shared solitude. But it has its moments. They rode back to Willow Creek side by side, neither speaking much but drawing comfort from each other's presence. As they approached the town, Rosalind steeled herself for what awaited: the stares, the whispers, the awkward apologies. True to her expectations, their arrival caused a stir. Word of Thornton's confession had reached Willow Creek ahead of them, and townsfolk gathered in the street, watching as Xavier escorted her to the boarding house where she had lived since arriving in town. Mrs. Whitaker, the owner, rushed out to meet them. "Miss Dawson." "Oh, my dear, what a terrible ordeal you've been through. Your room is just as you left it, of course." Rosalind thanked her, touched by the woman's genuine concern. Others approached more cautiously: Mr. Collins from the bank, Reverend Harrison and his wife, several parents of her students. Some offered sincere apologies, others merely awkward acknowledgments. Through it all, Xavier remained at her side, his steady presence a buffer against the overwhelming attention. When it became too much, he deftly suggested she needed rest, escorting her inside the boarding house and away from the crowd. In the quiet of the front parlor, Rosalind finally let her composed facade slip, sinking onto a settee with a shaky exhale. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Xavier remained standing, hat in hand, suddenly seeming uncomfortable in the genteel surroundings. "Just doing my duty, Miss Rosalind." "Is that all it was?" she asked softly. Duty? His eyes met hers, and for a moment the careful restraint he maintained slipped. "No," he admitted, "not all." Before either could say more, Mrs. Whitaker bustled in with tea and sandwiches, chattering about how Rosalind must be famished after her dreadful experience. Xavier took the opportunity to excuse himself, promising to check on her the following day. Watching him go, Rosalind felt as though something precious was slipping through her fingers, but she was too exhausted to chase after it. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Official statements were taken, Patterson was buried, and Sheriff Mills departed town under a cloud of scandal. Through it all, Xavier remained in Willow Creek, ostensibly to complete the necessary paperwork, but finding reasons to seek out Rosalind's company each day. They walked together through the town. He escorted her to resume her duties at the school. And gradually, the citizens of Willow Creek grew accustomed to seeing the schoolteacher and the Marshal side by side. A week after her release, Xavier found Rosalind at the schoolhouse after classes had ended. She was erasing the day's lessons from the blackboard, her back to the door when he entered. "The children seem happy to have you back," he observed. She turned, smiling at the sight of him. "They are. Children are more forgiving than adults." Setting down the eraser, she brushed chalk dust from her hands. "But you didn't come to discuss my students." "No," he agreed. "I received a telegram today. There's been trouble near the Montana border. They've requested I investigate." Rosalind's heart sank, though she'd known this moment was inevitable. "When do you leave?" "Tomorrow morning." He moved further into the classroom, stopping before her desk. "Unless I have reason to stay." The implication hung in the air between them. Rosalind searched his face, finding in it the same conflict she felt: duty versus desire, caution versus courage. "Would you stay, if I asked?" The words came out barely above a whisper. Xavier took a step closer. "Would you ask?" Rosalind had never been a woman to act impulsively. She had planned her journey west meticulously, had built her new life with careful consideration. But standing before this man who had believed in her when no one else would, calculation gave way to the urging of her heart. "Stay," she said simply. "Not forever, I wouldn't ask that of you. But long enough for us to discover if what I feel, what I think we both feel, is worth pursuing." Something in his expression softened, the habitual guardedness falling away to reveal a tenderness that took her breath away. "And what do you feel, Rosalind?" "That you see me," she answered honestly. "Not the schoolteacher or the Boston lady or the murder suspect, just me. And I see you too, Xavier, not just the Marshal with the silver star, but the man beneath it." He closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his. I've spent 15 years riding from town to town, never staying long enough to put down roots. I told myself it was the job, but the truth is, I never found a reason to stop riding. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms. Until now. Rosalind's heart thundered in her chest. And Montana. Can wait, he replied. Or another Marshal can go. For the first time in my life, I'm choosing something besides duty. When he kissed her, it was gentle at first, a question more than a demand. Rosalind answered by sliding her hands up to his shoulders, drawing him closer, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. People will talk, she murmured when they finally separated. Xavier chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her. Let them. We've both endured worse than gossip. He was right, Rosalind realized. After being accused of murder, what was a little scandal about the schoolteacher and the Marshal? What happens now? She asked. Now, Xavier said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, we take time to know each other properly. No cells, no investigations, no immediate danger. That sounds wonderful, Rosalind admitted. But eventually, you'll need to decide about your job, and I'll need to decide about staying in Willow Creek. Eventually, he agreed, but not today. Over the following weeks, Willow Creek watched in fascination as the unlikely romance blossomed between the refined Eastern schoolteacher and the rugged lawman. Xavier took a leave of absence from his duties, renting a small cabin on the edge of town rather than returning to his camp or staying at the saloon. Every evening after school, he would wait for Rosalind, and they would walk together, talking for hours. On weekends, he taught her to ride properly and to shoot a small revolver just in case, he insisted, though they both hoped she would never need such skills again. In turn, Rosalind shared her love of literature with Xavier, reading aloud by lamplight as they sat on the porch of his cabin. He had little formal education, but a quick mind and thoughtful perspective that often surprised her. When Rosalind mentioned her parents and the grief that had driven her west, Xavier spoke of his own losses: a sister to childbirth, a brother to a mining accident in Colorado. Shared sorrow formed yet another bond between them, as did shared laughter when the serious Marshal revealed an unexpected dry wit. Summer turned to autumn, painting the Wyoming landscape in brilliant golds and reds. With the changing season came decisions that could no longer be postponed. I've been offered a permanent position, Xavier told her one evening as they sat by the fire in his cabin. Chief Marshal for the Northern Wyoming Territory. Rosalind looked up from the book she'd been reading. Here, in Willow Creek, he shook his head. Cheyenne. It would mean an office instead of constant travel, more stability. It sounds like a good opportunity, she said carefully, waiting for him to continue. It is. He poked at the fire, sending sparks dancing up the chimney, but I'd still be away sometimes. And Cheyenne is 3 days' ride from here, understanding dawned. You're asking if I would consider moving to Cheyenne. I'm asking if you would consider marrying me and moving to Cheyenne, he corrected, meeting her gaze steadily. I know it's sudden, it's been nearly 3 months, Rosalind interrupted with a smile. That's practically a lifetime in frontier terms. Is that a yes? Hope brightened his eyes. Setting aside her book, Rosalind crossed to kneel beside his chair. It's I need to know something first. Do you want me to give up teaching? Many husbands wouldn't want their wives working. I'm not many husbands, Xavier replied. Cheyenne has schools that would be fortunate to have you, or if you'd prefer, you could start your own. Relief and love surged through her in equal measure. Then yes, Xavier Irwin. I will marry you and move to Cheyenne and build a new life with you. He pulled her up into his lap, cradling her face between his calloused hands. You've changed everything for me, Rosalind, made me want more than just the next case, the next town. And you've shown me that belonging isn't about a place, she whispered against his lips. It's about a person. Their wedding was a simple affair held in Willow Creek's small church 2 weeks later. Despite the brevity of their courtship, few in town seemed surprised by the match. As Reverend Harrison later remarked to his wife, Anyone with eyes could see those two were meant for each other from the moment he stood up for her. Emma Harrison served as Rosalind's attendant, proudly carrying a bouquet matching the bride's. Many of Rosalind's students attended, as did several of Xavier's fellow marshals who had ridden from as far as Denver to witness their colleagues' unexpected matrimony. After the ceremony, the town hosted a celebration at the newly opened hotel dining room. Even former Sheriff Mills, now working as a rancher outside town, came to offer grudging congratulations. As the evening wore on, Xavier drew Rosalind away from the festivities and outside onto the hotel's veranda. "Mrs. Irwin," he said, the name still new and wonderful on his tongue. "Are you happy?" In answer, Rosalind stretched up on tiptoe to kiss him, unconcerned about the scandalized gasps from several matrons visible through the hotel windows. "Deliriously," she assured him. "Though I may miss Willow Creek more than I expected, despite everything, it became home." "We'll visit," he promised. "And perhaps someday, when I'm ready to retire completely, we might return." The image of growing old with Xavier in a small house on the edge of town, perhaps with children playing in the yard, filled Rosalind with a contentment she had never imagined possible when she first journeyed west. "I would like that," she said softly. "But for now, I'm eager to begin our new adventure." "It won't always be easy," Xavier cautioned. "The territory is still wild in many ways." Rosalind smiled, remembering the frightened, desperate woman in the jail cell and how far she had come. "I'm stronger than I look, Marshal Irwin. And I have you believing in me." His arms tightened around her. "Always," he promised. "From the moment you said no one believes me, and I became the first who did." The next morning, they departed for Cheyenne in a wagon loaded with their combined possessions, her books and teaching materials, his Spartan collection of practical items, and wedding gifts from the townspeople. As Willow Creek faded into the distance behind them, Rosalind felt not sadness but anticipation. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "That sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us to the best," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "If I hadn't been arrested for murder, we might never have met," he chuckled, wrapping an arm around her. "I prefer to think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are meant to be." The U.S. Marshal and the schoolteacher, an unlikely pair thrown together by tragedy and bound together by love. As their wagon rolled toward Cheyenne and their future, Rosalind knew with certainty that she had finally found what she had been seeking when she journeyed west. Not just a place to belong, but a person to belong with. 5 years later, Xavier and Rosalind Irwin stood on the porch of their Cheyenne home, watching their 3-year-old son Robert chase fireflies in the twilight. Beside them, infant daughter Catherine slept peacefully in her mother's arms. Xavier's position as chief marshal had brought the stability he had promised, though occasional duties still took him away from home. Rosalind had established a small school for girls that had quickly gained a reputation for excellence throughout the territory. "A letter came from Emma Harrison today," Rosalind told her husband as they watched their son's delighted antics. "She's finished her teaching certification and asks if there might be a position at my school." Xavier smiled. "The girl who helped save you, now following in your footsteps." "She was braver than most grown men in that town," Rosalind reflected. "I'd be proud to have her join us." As darkness settled over the Wyoming landscape, they called Robert inside, tucked both children into bed, and retired to the sitting room where they had spent countless evenings reading together, discussing Xavier's cases, or planning Rosalind's curriculum. "You ever regret it?" Xavier asked suddenly. "Marrying a lawman, living with the worry when I'm away." Rosalind set aside her book and moved to sit beside him on the sofa. "Never," she said firmly. "Do you regret marrying a headstrong schoolteacher who insists on having her own career?" He laughed, pulling her close. "Not for a single moment." "Then we're both exactly where we're meant to be," Rosalind concluded, resting her head on his shoulder. Outside, the vast Wyoming sky filled with stars, stretching endlessly over the territory they both now called home. Inside, in the warmth of their embrace, was everything they had each sought throughout their lives: understanding, trust, and the profound certainty of being believed. For Rosalind and Xavier Irwin, it was more than enough. It was everything.